I'm surrounded by some army men. I have a general in my Renault in the back, like in a movie, the big mustache, the full uniform, and I have to drive this guy to Damascus.
You're listening to I Teach Overseas podcast with your host, Daniel Mendez.
Welcome to the I Teach Overseas podcast. Whether you're currently teaching overseas or considering the idea of taking your profession to a foreign country, my vision for this podcast is to bring this international community together to discuss current issues, trends, and meet some amazing people along the way. My guest today is Henri Lemaire, a former colleague that officially retired in June of 2017, and this was recorded on that very last day. If you'd like to follow along in the show notes for episode 1, go to iTeachOverseas.com/1. Here today with me, Henri Lemaire, 36 years overseas. I just wanted to hear you tell me, how has it been?
First of all, I have to say I loved it. I have no regrets at all. It has been a good life, full of adventures. I met so many people. It changed me to accept so many things, to open my mind at every level. It could be social, religious, education, color of people, anything. I think I became a very, very open-minded person and more respectful, I think, overall. And I can feel that when I go back in Belgium, or I went back in Belgium in the past for the summer, and I see the state of mind of people, which hasn't changed at all. And I feel that I have grown so much compared to an average, normal citizen of any country, I would say, not just Belgium. I think we are extremely lucky to live what we are living or experiencing.
1981, you're in Belgium. What caused you to look outside of Belgium?
Yeah, I think we need to go back even before 1981. People have to know that I'm born in Africa. And I grew up there with my parents, of course. And I loved it. And when I came back in Belgium, I was 16 years old. I say, I don't want to stay here. Then I went to school and got my degree, and I say, first opportunity that I have, I want to see the world. I want to get out. I don't want to stick to a country and spend my life and do the traditional thing. Then in 81, I got my first job to the U.S. In Louisiana. There was an exchange program between Belgium and Louisiana State, and I taught in the Bayou for 3 years around Baton Rouge and New Orleans, as a French teacher, as French as a second of a foreign language. Loved it. And I also discovered the United States, and I thought that the American culture was fitting me much more than the European ones. And I say, okay, I need to go back to this country. But visa issue, we could only stay 3 years. Then I had to do something very unique. I mean, not unique, but at the time it was mandatory in Belgium, my military service. Since I don't have that state of mind, I chose the shortest option, which was to do it in Germany. Because at that time, you have to go back, guys, I'm almost 58 years old. There were two Germanys, East and West. And NATO had the west border of Germany divided with all the allies, and there was a Belgium section there. And if you were going to apply to go there, you had a military service shorter of 2 months. I say that's what I need, 10 months instead of 12, send me to the border. Then I spent 1 year there as a soldier and also as a teacher. Kind of the Cold War, we were checking the Russian passing by, and the Russian were checking us passing by also. We were really at the border. Then it has nothing to do with teaching, but then since I could manage some English at the time, I became the driver of the colonel of the base. which gave me a nice uniform, and I drove this guy all over Germany, which was kind of very interesting because I became a driver basically in a black car with the little flags right and left, and I had a certain functions and things to do, and I was teaching also part-time there. That was a very unique type of way of doing your military service, but that was mine. Then still the desire to move, and I found a job in Algeria.
I really hope you're enjoying this episode of I Teach Overseas. Let me know what you think by going to iTeachOverseas.com.
I will tell you things that I only discovered later on, but I went for the interview, and I was in a little room. The door was open, and I went for the interview, and I thought that it went well, and I got the job. When I left, they gave me a round-trip ticket, and I say, well, why are you giving me a round-trip ticket? Then that's when they tell you, well, so many people, when they see where they arrive, they just ask for one thing, I want to go back. Then I say, well, maybe you should have told me that during the interview, not after I had signed the contract. Okay. Then I went, and in fact, I had a fantastic year. There were 3 companies, a French, a Belgian, and a Danish one, building a huge factory at the border of the Sahara Desert. The name of the village was Ain Touta, I remember that. And they had built a small school there where I was supervising students from these 3 countries. They had correspondence courses, and I was teaching also. But what I didn't know, I arrived there at night in a little Subaru car from the company. It took me at least 4 hours from Algiers to be driven there. And we stop in front of a container. And I say, what's this? And they say, well, that's your accommodation. That's your room. Then I was a bit surprised.
To clarify, that's a shipping container.
A shipping container.
So one of those 40-foot long, probably the size of this.
The size of this room, yeah. Then it was a second surprise, and I say, all right. And then we opened the door, and in this container, there was a bed. It was nice. It was kind of furbished, I will say. And there was a bed at the end, one single bed, a little window in the middle. There was a desk. And on the opposite side, there was a kind of a small kitchen. It's not a kitchen. There was a panel where I could warm up food. And in the other corner was the shower. And it's where I lived.
For a year.
For a year. People couldn't believe it, me neither, but I thought it was funny at one point. And then portable school. There were 4 classes. We were really at the border of the Sahara. And it has been a fantastic year because later on we got a car, a little Renault 4. I love cars. And with my colleague, who I still know and visit every year because we share so many things. It was unique. We went all over the place in Algeria in that little Renault. We were teachers, but we were parents. We were educators. We were everything in that base. Because beside the 4 of us, we were 4 of us, there was a couple and 2 single, Patricia, my colleague, and I. There was nobody else, just workers. And it has been a fantastic year. There was technically a pool that never arrived in the compound because it was against the principle of the country at the time to have fun and enjoy yourself in a pool. In fact, we went through so many things. The country was managed by the army at the time. We had to deal with the army on the roads also. But as soon as they knew we were not French, I'm from Belgium, we had a green pass, which was a plus. You see, to come from a small country sometimes has a lot of pluses. It was 1 year in Algeria.
With his first year of international teaching in Algeria under his belt, Henri moved to Cincinnati, Ohio. He spent the next 6 years teaching French immersion in public schools during the day while taking night courses to get his Bachelor of Education. Eventually, he earned a master's in French literature. When it came time to leave the U.S., Henri wanted to stay abroad, and he kept his mind open to all possibilities, including former war zones.
Well, you need to start somewhere, and this is a good advice for everybody or every teacher. So I think who would like to go overseas, don't be too picky at the beginning. You need to start somewhere. And at that time, it was the end of the Gulf War, the first one. And I say, well, let's choose Kuwait because nobody will want to go there. Then Henri decided just to go to Kuwait, and I focused only on one country, and I say, I need a job in Kuwait. It was an obsession almost, and I got one. My parents, of course, were crazy because it was still, the war was over, but you still had all the mines in the country. You had the pollution because if you remember the smoke, they put fire to the old field and you could still see the gray sky and the leftover of the war, basically. It was an experience. I don't think it was very dangerous. If you were following the instruction, there was, to me, no danger at the time. And up I went to Kuwait because they were hiring one teacher per department in many schools. They didn't know how many kids were going to come back. Then they needed a French teacher, a Spanish teacher, a math teacher. Then I said, okay, let's go. Then great experience because I tasted a little bit what a war is all about. And it was a small war, but not a pretty one. And I think there's no pretty war anyway.
So you saw a lot of the aftermath of
if you remember, I went to see, even with the American Army, we went to see the Highway of Hell. If you remember, when the Iraqis left, they were bombed on their way back to Iraq, and there were hundreds of cars and trucks being burned, and I have pictures of that. I say, oh my God. You could see camels being exploded all over the place because they don't read sign that it's no landmines. No, it's a landmine and you shouldn't be there, and it was a pretty common sight. In my first meeting when we arrived, we have 7 or 8 teachers. It was with the American Army. It was a soldier. I don't know exactly the title of that guy, but I can still see him. And he had a table, and in front of him, he had all different kind of mines that the Iraqi had put toward the country. And it was very tricky because some looks like a bottle of Coke, a doll. It was really done to kill people. And they say, golden rules, you walk on concrete, you pick nothing out of the ground. They say if you follow these 2 rules, you have no problems. But don't go on a beach, don't go on the sand, don't go anywhere.
Henri, when someone said that to you, what were you thinking? What were you feeling?
Or maybe I'm not in touch with realities, and I say, okay, these are simple rules. If I do that, there is no problem. But I was not expecting to see so much. That it was more what disturbed me the most. There was the prisoner of war, POWs, because the Kuwaitis for a long time were missing thousands of people, and that was very visible in the country with posters, announcements in the paper. The burned buildings, it was more the visual thing that affect me than these guidelines. To me, they were clear. I feel kind of safe. We were extremely welcomed by the population. No way you will pay a taxi. Everything was free because they were still thanking the U.S. mainly and the other countries for the liberation. It was a very interesting year. And again, when we opened the school, small classes, all these people were there for the same goal. It has to work. We have to rebuild all this.
Just to clarify, you were one of the first people to go back into Kuwait as a teacher.
Yes.
To the American school there, and you reopened it?
Yeah, we were the first one to go back and to reopen the school. And I mentioned, I think, to some of my colleagues, my school in the basement was a torture place for Kuwaiti people. And we couldn't get down, and I was, of course, very curious. I wanted to know why we didn't have access to the basement of the school. Then I've been told, and I've seen what it's all about. You could see blood on the walls. It was not access. I repeat, the kids couldn't. It was impossible for them to go. But you really touch the horror of what people can do to others, and of course, this was fixed later on. But
so when the Iraqis occupied Kuwait, they used that school as a torture or containment area.
I think it's as close I want to be from a war. What I've seen, I don't need to see more than that. But people were full of energy, ready to rebuild, ready to restart. And it's a unique feeling because some have been there before the war, we're coming back, a few, some students also. Then there was kind of an energy, it's difficult to describe, but to recreate, rebuild, like, you are not going to get us, or something like that. We are back and we continue what we have. And I stayed 3 years there, and I really enjoy them. But 3 years in Kuwait, once you know Kuwait, it's enough, because it's basically a city, and there's, on one side you have Iraq, on the other side you have Saudi Arabia. You're a bit limited.
Like most international teachers, school breaks offer a lot of opportunities to explore the world and find adventure. But sometimes adventure finds you.
We are in Syria, not the Syria of nowadays. And I was visiting a friend in Deir el-Zor, which is in the northern part of Syria, near the Iraqi border. And I was there for 4 days. And on the way back, had a rental car, and I was speeding 140, 150. I couldn't go faster. The thing was full speed. And I was early, around 4 o'clock in the morning, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And I had to catch my plane in Damascus. And then it was like a plateau, and I was coming down, and I see at the horizon 2 flashing lights. And my first thought was, it's impossible they have speed trap here. I'm almost in the desert. There's nobody. I'm only one on the road, and I see but I was not sure what it was. And of course, I slowed down, and more I arrived, I realized it was like a barrage.
Like a barricade?
A barricade on the road with 2 military guys and on motorcycles in a tank. And I say, okay, I'm alone. I have nothing. I'm in a rental car. I was speeding, and obviously I have to stop, and there's nobody around. Stop the car, and they asked me if I was speaking Arabic. I say, sorry, no. And they say, wait. Then they took me out of the car, and they say, wait. And there was just one tiny little house, but just one house, not even 2. Maybe 300 meters on the side of the road. Then one of the soldiers went, opened the door, and came out. It's like in a movie, a general in full uniform. And I say, okay, what's going on here? I have 2 soldiers fully armed next to me. I have this general coming in front of me. And then they opened the rear door of the car. They sat the general into my car. They told me to get into the car, and they say, Damascus. Then you have to imagine, I like to call myself a little French teacher. I'm surrounded by some army men. I have a general in my Renault in the back, like in a movie, the big mustache, the full uniform. And I have to drive this guy to Damascus. I was going to Damascus. They knew there was only one highway. It's not even a highway, one road from where I was. And then I drove this guy. He had no English. Then he wanted to know from where I'm coming from. That the only conversation we had, he was looking at me in the mirror there, was looking at him. And for 2 hours, I had that guy in my car. Then when we arrived near Damascus, he asked me to stop this specific place because I think he didn't want to be seen coming out of my car. I asked to take a picture. He said no. Because I would have loved at least a proof of that moment. But that's the kind of adventure that you have. And I will always remember that one because I panicked a little bit, I have to say. When I say I'm alone here, what's going to happen to me? I have no one. But I never thought I was going to drive one of those guys.
Did the general pay?
Nothing, not a word, just a thank you, left and disappeared in the crowd in Damascus. And it was near the Meridian Hotel, this I remember. And I'm sure that's where he was going. But didn't want to be dropped in front. But that's the kind of adventure that if you stay in Belgium, you will never have something like this.
What would you say to someone that is thinking about going overseas? What would you say to them?
I will say to anyone, if you have the chance, the opportunity to leave your country, go. it can only be good on the big picture and in the long term, because that will change you. It's not always easy because you will miss or friends or family, but you will have new friends, not a new family. But in nowadays, I'm sorry, you have Skype, you are in contact, it's so easy. Then now you are still very in touch with the people that you might miss, but it gives you so many opportunities to understand this world, to have your own vision of things, to broaden your mind in every aspect of life. I think it's a unique experience. You need to go right away and start your life. And I believe if you do that and if you like it, you are gone for your life with that, because that's your lifestyle. You want always more. You want to always visit more, see more. I'm almost to 100 countries right now I've visited. I'm between 95 and 100. I have to count. But I enjoy all of them. And this living overseas, especially as a teacher, gives you that opportunity to discover so many things.
Thank you for sharing your story. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I hope you've enjoyed listening to Henri's stories. I'd like to take a moment and dedicate this episode to Stephen Bogor, who passed away in December. Stephen had a passion for traveling and spent 2016-2017 traveling the world. Stephen had a passion for history and an amazing ability of connecting with middle school students. We will miss you, Steve. I'm Daniel Mendez from iTeachOverseas podcast. Thanks for listening.